Hello, this is Paul Lennon again with the second part of my autobiography. I'll try to bring it along a little more skibbily here, a little fast, so you won't get totally bored by this story. Anyway, we're in the first chapter now, and see if we can get through the first chapter. It was called, of course, Recruiting, and it starts with Bundoran. Bundoran, as you know, is a beautiful spot in the north of Ireland, the north of the Republic of Ireland, excuse me, in County Donegal by the sea. So Bundoran by the sea. A free trip to Bundoran in County Donegal changed my life forever. On the 1st of July 1961, as the beige VW van swung into Bundro's house, my heretofore unremarkable life took a dramatic turn. In that glorious setting of sheer cliffs, wide beaches, salt breezes, and soft hills, I would begin the first step of my vocation come vocation with the then unknown Mexican order Legion of Christ. Little did I suspect that as the van crunched to a halt, my life was pulling away on a vertiginous tour of pleasant and unpleasant surprises. Beaming bright and warm on that Saturday afternoon, the sun spotlighted a bunch of shirts, ties, and jackets tumbling carefree onto the gravel. About a dozen Dubliners and Limerick men had been packed into the van with names like Donal and Brian, Adrian, Dermot, Brendan, Colm, Pádraig, Fintan, Damien, and Liam, all fine specimens of Irish late teens. There must have been at least one more vehicle, as over 20 recruits eventually lined up to be snapped against the backdrop of our temporary abode called Bundro's House. Bundro's House, a once fashionable Georgian mansion. Its name from the Gaelic, the mouth of the Drowse, the river, Bun, the mouth, the end of the river Drowse, describes how the residence was built at the river estuary as it flows into Donegal Bay. To this day, the river is renowned for its salmon and sea trout. On that idyllic first day, we were not aware that Father Maciel, the founder of the Legion of Christ, of this young Mexican order, which was new to Ireland, had decided to make this picturesque place his fishing grounds for vocations to the Catholic priesthood. Although the charismatic Father Maciel had originally targeted the teeming banks of Dublin Bay, Archbishop John Charles McQuaid had been unyielding. The Legion would be allowed to recruit competitively in the Diocese of Dublin, but not to set up house there. So the resourceful young founder would bring recruits from Dublin and other parts of Ireland. We got Wexford, we had Waterford, I remember quite clearly. And he would bring those recruits from different parts of Ireland to a summer camp in beautiful Bundoran. Most of the gullible young salmon eagerly leaping upstream had recently passed their leaving certificate exam. We were graduating from high school with honors. Naturally, for even to think of becoming a priest required being endowed with more than average intelligence. Earning academic honors, of course, is not the same as being smart. In the Ireland of the late 50s and 60s, when this story is taking place, the Catholic Church that was alive, strong, and vibrant in home, school, and society, entering a seminary or a convent for the girls seemed a very viable and acceptable career choice, one of the best available to that generation of limited options. A rapier thrust from hard-nosed psychologist Mona Shivlin, later on in my life at Catholic University, would many years later puncture my presumptuous bubble at the Catholic University of America. Was the seminary a door for higher studies? Thousands of youth were being forced to flee the country for England and the USA and Australia in search of employment. Entry-level positions in technical, commercial accounting, bookkeeping, or bureaucracy of some kind were available to low-income youth, but college or university were not a viable choice for the majority of high school graduates in the Ireland of that time. Achievement-based university scholarships were for the gifted in that situation a vocation as an overseas missionary, opened the door to pursue higher studies free of charge, avoid the monotony of family life, and escape the cultural and geographical confines of our tiny, at that time backward and at times bigoted country. 7 out of the 28 graduates of my St. Vincent's Christian Brothers School were to enter seminary that year. 3 of us who joined the Legion felt that we had made the best choice. Single-handedly, charismatic Father James Quandro sold us on how attractive it would be to join this new and modern religious order. The lyrics of "I'll join the Legion" faithfully reflected our indomitable do-or-die spirit as we sped towards Bundoran. Some months previously, the Texan Padre had come to our school inviting us to try out as the first Irish candidates of this exotic order called Legionaries of Christ. He apologized. Quite charming, Father James. Greetings. Quite charming he was, and he apologized for not bringing his guitar to serenade us with the "Ay, ay, 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 cantar no llores." He was a blocky 5'8", always ramrod straight and full of positive energy, the handsome sun-tanned recruiter hailed from San Antonio, Texas, or from Monterrey, Mexico, as the audience required. Jimmy was with the sleek black hair, must have already kissed the Blarney Piedra back home. His enthusiasm was contagious, igniting our idealism, generosity, and trust. At the time, we said yes. He was the only Legion member we had ever met, and we took his word that the Legion was the place to be. A Mexican order for Mexico and Latin America in response to Pope John Paul XXIII's plea for missionary priests seemed to be so much better than any of the Irish-born or more established institutions. Warm fantasies of Spain, Rome, Mexico, and Latin America were soon fueling the imagination of one who had left Ireland only once before for murky Liverpool via the port of Holyhead on the Isle of Anglesey in North Wales. Lacking experience, exposure, and alternative enticements, without second thoughts, I chose the Legion Triumph. The fact that that venture was sponsored by the Catholic Church assuaged the cautious and insecure nature, while simultaneously attracting the unconventional adventure that lay hidden deep within me. I hope to be successful and to do a lot of good. The Legion adventure in Latin America would also satisfy other, then unconscious, deeply hidden drives. I would always be needed, I would always be loved, and I would never be rejected. Of course, now this is, as you can see, this is the post-reading psychological, psychoanalytic reading of my own life story. I'm throwing in stuff here which were not present at that particular time. So I'm trying to analyze myself as we go along and tell the story, and etc. In the van that day, as we sped towards Bundoran, we had been singing the popular songs of the time: Elvis Presley, Ricky Nelson, Roy Orbison, Connie Francis, the Everly Brothers. Dream, 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 dream. We were certainly dreamers. Paul Anka. I'm so young and you're so old. This, my darling, I've been told. Okay, whatever. And an assortment of Irish standbys and Scottish favourites like Keep Right On to the End of the Road. I joined the Legion, which we've always mentioned. And Pierce Allen, one of the boys, he adopted the lyrics of It's a Long Way to Tipperary and wanted it to be our anthem as future novices. It's a long way to Salamanca. It's a long way to go without your Spanish. It's a long way to Salamanca, to the nicest town I know. Really was very hot and very freezing in the winter. Anyway, we were not fans of Mel Torme because in our mountain Greasony or any kind of the sensual songs, Peggy Lee, you give me fever, and maybe even Guy Mitchell. He at the time, we'd be singing. She wears red feathers and a hula hula skirt. Frankie Lane's Jezebel told us just how dangerous girls could be. and maybe even we had to pronounce Johnny Ray's uh, "Just to walking in the rain" or something like that, or "Walking my baby back home," whatever it was, over meadows and field in a white sport coat and a pink carnation. Okay, we Celts, Celts, we love to sing in love and war. I sang along and was quite lively and gregarious, excuse me, gregarious. Today we drove to Bundoran, coming out of my little shy shell. That's why I'm telling people I don't mind being alone. I'm really a shy person. I don't look it, but I am. I do not know whether I sang because I was happy or because I was trying to be happy. Father James created an atmosphere of heady excitement and euphoria. Underneath, my heart was heavy, butterflies in my stomach lively, and the lump in my throat hard and sour as a lemon drop. When I took leave of my parents and sisters in Cabra West, Mr. and Mrs. McCann and their bunch of good natured children, I said goodbye to my neighbours, Mr. and Mrs. McAvoy, Paddy, Val, and Linda, Mrs. Slattery across the back garden, who always referred to her husband as John, God love him. Remember these things. Mrs. Freeman, the other side, whose husband, Tucker Freeman, was permanently in blackface because he worked shoveling coal on the docks. And the kind Mrs. Deneen, the country lady with hens in the backyard on the corner of Fossa Avenue and Broombridge Road. Life was never boring in Cabra West, the Dublin Corporation housing scheme designed in the 1940s to lure inner city families away from the tenement houses on such as Lower Kevin Street, where my mother was born. My parents were very proud of the semi-detached two-story house allotted to them. Daddy's salary at the printers of Alec Thom and Son, uh, just over £5 at the time, judiciously administered by my mother, Chrissy, covered the rent and utilities and left enough for food, clothing, and an occasional treat. I lived on Fossa Avenue, wherever the name came from, which was the main road, and number 27 bus terminal was just outside my door. This was bane and boom. We lacked privacy by always having people 10 yards from our front door queuing up for the bus outside, and we could peek out at them with their foibles from behind the lace curtains. I was a little, imagine, 5-year-old, uh, self unconscious at that time, unself conscious, thank God. I would straddle the wall, the little brick wall at the end of our garden, and kind of on horseback. And I watched the people. I have this probably from a very early age. I was observing people and the way they acted, their manners, their characters, maybe from a very, very early age. That was part of who I am, I suppose. There was a fellow called Mad Joe. He was deranged, young man. He was always harassing the women at the bus stop, and he would simultaneously fascinate and frighten me. I was not sure what he meant by shouting "rubber hump," but it sounded like something vulgar or bad. People would smile, say nothing, and turn away. They were very, very tolerant people. Uh, then there was Bang Bang from Inchicore, who was famous all over Dublin. He was another mentally ill person who, man, he would jump on the our double-decker buses, which have a kind of a landing part where the busman, the bus collector would stand. The driver of front bus collector would be charging the people, and so Bang Bang would kind of stand up on that platform, hold on to the pole of the moving vehicle, pull out his pistol and out of his imaginary holster, and shoot bystanders on the sidewalk. Many people would kind of humor him. They duck and run for cover to join in his game. These were the people of Dublin, sharp-tongued, I'm telling you, but compassionate and fun-loving. Another great advantage of my house was the vacant lot across the street on the corner of Ratholt Road. Gypsies, in reality, are Irish itinerants. We would call them gypsies. I think they're called traveling people now. They used to set up their caravans a few times a year and graze their ponies there. The children running around and scaring us probably to a certain extent. On other occasions, small fairs would be set up and would set up shop with amusements to entertain the neighboring families. As I was growing up a little bit into later childhood, was able to withdraw from Mummy's close supervision. She was very strict. I played soccer and rounders, kind of a mix of cricket and baseball, on Broombridge Road, where Dublin is no Broomer. Everything has a slang name to it, which was the side road from Fossa Avenue, and we get chased by the coppers. I often ignored my mother's pleas. Paul, come in. You're not supposed to be playing on the street. She was always concerned about me associating with those rough boys. But I was happy with them. Others might have considered them gurriers, but they were my friends. Together with Jackie Walsh, Tanskin, James Gilligan, and the Guiney brothers, I would defy the authorities, jumping over the low walls, running through the front gardens, and in around the houses into the backyards when the local rozzer came prowling on his bike. We were not supposed to play on the streets. We were proud to include one other Protestant lad among us. He was the only non-Catholic, Alfie. Really nice fellow. Here comes a photograph from those times in our little backyard. It's not a great photograph, but there we are. Mammy and Daddy. Who else is there? My sister Patty. Oh, that's me. Sorry, me. And then there's Mary. Yeah. Who else is there? Mary, Carmel, and Christine. My big sister is not in this one. Sister Patty. Where we are. Chrissy, Paul, Jack, Mary, Christine, and Carmel. Some of the other kids were more physically daring than me. They would scut the buses that took off from outside my house while the bus conductor was busying himself collecting the fares and ringing them up on his little ticket machine. One or two boys would latch onto the back of the moving bus, keeping their feet off the ground, hugging. They would hang onto the rear fender with their hands and arms to feel the thrill of speed. Then the other kids would shout, "Look behind and lash the whip," to alert the conductor. At this, he would peer around the entrance to see where they were, who was scutting. He would shout at the bowsies to let go. If they didn't, he would take off the leather strap that passed over his shoulders, holding the ticket machine. He would try to dislodge the scudder with a swing of the belt, with more or less intention to do bodily harm, according to his personality. Pretty risky business, and one of the reasons my neighborhood was called the Wild West. But that was tame compared to the joyriding that became popular later on in the 70s, when young people stole cars and raced the police squads up and down Fossa Avenue. With that and the outbreak of petty burglary, what did I say? Burglary, excuse yourself. Uh, the burglary happened at the Christian Brothers schools, but this was pretty petty burglary. My mother left the family home and moved to Ennis, County Clare, with my sister Christine and her husband Christy. On July the 1st, 1961, without second thoughts, I left behind those familiar and beloved streets of my childhood. For a shy person like I was, revealing such a personal decision as a vocation trial, I'm entering, I would say you're entering the seminary, whatever. It was not easy, nor was saying goodbye. I remember telling my high school teacher on the last day of class that I was considering a seminary. Brother Ernest Carew, Ernie. He was a serious little character, always fair and respectful to students, looked at me with a smile and ground out in his habitual way from behind his teeth. Well, Mr. Lennon, you certainly kept that up your sleeve. He wished me well. He was one of the goodies, one of the good guys. The reaction I got from my soccer coach, Sean Goggins, was less encouraging. Soccer, of course, was my passion before Legion. He had known me for many years and must never have noticed my inclination for the religious life. He had watched me train in the rain and mud, mix and joke with the teammates, and play on Sunday mornings with so much passion. He only knew my smart alecky outward shell of toughness and glib remarks. One evening, as we were leaving the training grounds in Santry on our bicycles, a couple of girls walked by. My tongue got ahead of my brain and said, "Hey, young ones, do you want to lift on my crossbar?" Something slipped out. I immediately felt crimson fire sear my cheeks and neck as I turned to see the shocked look on Sean Goggins' face. Now he was disconcerted when I told him I was going away. "You certainly had me fooled," he said. Anyway, I felt I owed it to him to tell him, but I didn't recall telling any of my football pals, anyone from the tennis club or my school chums, fearing they would not understand or call me a sissy. But perhaps Sean was right. I did not have the clerical look about me, that sanctimonious, holier than thou, butter wouldn't melt in your mouth look. I have never been solemn, at least not consciously or as a pose. People who take themselves too seriously or parade around with an air of supercilious superiority are always certain to become the butt of Dubliners' wit. Who the hell does he think he is? There's something instinctual in us that wants to take the proud and the vain down a peg. So I was not priest material, as they say, in the conventional sense of the word. The day before leaving, I had carefully packed my dusty brown cardboard suitcase. Mark this, the dusty brown cardboard suitcase, because that would be with me all my life in the Legion. Somehow it survived. Mammy, from her meagre savings and following Father James' instructions, had bought me enough clothes to go away. 6 pairs of underwear and socks, smelling nice and new. Sewn to each item was my personal name tag from Arnott's, the fancy store on Henry Street. I always got the best treatment from Mammy. As I sucked in the briny sea air deep into my lungs that fateful late July 1st afternoon, I noticed with disappointment we were not the absolutely first candidates to this new order. Half a dozen other young postulants in frayed black cassocks, recruited earlier during the school term, were standing in the driveway ready to greet us. While appreciating the reception, I felt neither overly impressed or totally displaced by these recruits. To us Dubliners, they were, excuse the expression, culchies, provincials who were not up to our Jackeen standards. I wonder how they felt that first day when they saw the new guys crashing the founders' exclusive party. I do know that they warmly, if awkwardly, received each one of us with the Mexican hug, the legionary abrazo, which was to be part of our new lives. That first time was really uncomfortable. Some of us would not have known how to embrace a woman, never mind a man, but I liked the novelty and wanted to learn Mexican customs. Skipping. We had not the slightest idea of what we were getting into, and must admit in hindsight that on entering the Legion, I knew next to nothing about the religious life and the practice of the vows. I had not realized that would be part of the Legion package. My goal was to be a missionary priest in Latin America. During the next couple of years, I would accept the demanding rules of Legion consecrated life as a toll to be paid on the road to becoming a priest. At the beginning, I had not even seriously considered the heavy responsibilities of the priesthood and celibacy as I flung myself impetuously into the breach. Join the Legion, we're soldiers, recruits. A strong and generous spirit throbbed forcefully in our innocent young temples. Everything was new and different and exciting. We immediately attempted to adjust and bond. During the following days, I got on well with the other fellows. I knew how to please everyone and was always ready with a smile or a joke. It was good to feel liked and accepted by everyone. There were some artistic elements among us, boys who painted landscapes and portraits, Adrian and Jude, I can remember Jude, handsome sandy-haired with the Kirk Douglas Van Gogh left cleft chin, was as gentle as a kitten and wouldn't hurt a fly. He used to get on my nerves sometimes because when I bumped into him at soccer, he would apologize. I mean, just charging ahead and, you know, what's it called? Making my way around him, dribbling my way around him, and might bump into him. And sorry, brother. By that time, we were calling each other Paul or brother Paul, whatever it was. Yes, yes, brother Jude. I'm sorry. Gave you the elbow. He was always walking around with a Spanish dictionary in his hand. He was a studious guy, a real, what we would call SWAT. Such was his flair for languages. He is still a legionary today. Lovely person. He became a scripture scholar. Sad to say, I lost track of the other two artists. I think maybe one who is still a friend. Declan was the most popular of the group. He was part of the new group, the Dubliners, swaggering around. Brother, please don't walk that way. It's not the legionary way. Don't move your shoulders around, as the whatever it is, Standing 6'3" in his stocking feet, he was outgoing and good-natured. Father James liked to say he plucked Declan out of a rock and roll band to follow Jesus. Uh, Actually, Declan did play in a band and could belt out Jerry Lee Lewis's Great Balls of Fire or Floyd Kramer's On the Rebound pretty well. With himself, Pierce, and company, we had great sing-alongs during our time at Monroe's. Deck also encouraged me to have a go at those Dean Martin songs. He thought I sounded like Dino. I wanted to be like Johnny Mathis or Perry Como, but I had to surrender all that to be one of the first founding members of the Legion of Christ. Our generation did not have a problem with delayed gratification. This is an important psychological concept. Delayed gratification. We were able to wait for the reward after the time. So we delayed for our gratification. Remember Harry Lauder's old Scottish song? Keep right on to the end of the road, keep right on to the end. Though the way be long, let your heart beat strong. Keep right on to the end. Though you're tired and weary, still journey on till you come to your happy abode, where all you love and you're dreaming of will be there at the end of the road. I'm telling you. So then we had the next little section, postulancy and padres. This first stage of your training, afterwards we realized was called postulancy. Is you're postulating, whatever that is. You're asking to be admitted to the religious life. We didn't know what the heck was going on, but we were kind of there. We were following the track, mule train, shall we say. After a few weeks, we joyfully welcomed new reinforcements from Rome. Exciting, Rome, people, foreign people, Mexicans, a Spaniard. Oh my God, I've never seen these people before in my life. This is just colossal. As they say in Ireland, it's brilliant. Um, well, first of all, there was a padre who came, a priest, very handsome, good-looking priest, Father Neftali Sanchez Tinoco. With a name like that, you had to be special. We were impressed to learn that he was one of the very first Mexican 10-year-olds that was recruited by Father Maciel around the 1941. Now, these were the first legionaries, first members of this order. They were from the Mexican provinces in the very Catholic areas of Mexico, like the states of Jalisco and Michoacan, mostly, I would say. And these would be my the younger fellows would be my companions later in Salamanca. But now we have these students coming from Rome. Neftali was one of the first ordained priests, so he could hear our confessions. That was a trick there, and he was going to be our director, spiritual director. Again, I hadn't the slightest idea. And the three other new staff members had arrived at Mondraus. We began calling them Padre, and they were like our recruiter. They were not ordained priests, but not even deacons, but theology students. But the Legion was always calling these Padres, kind of assuming they were priests. I liked having these assistants with us during our daily activities, including playing basketball. We learned how to play basketball, soccer, lending a certain gravitas to our hijinks. Father's Ramiro Fernandez, big, strong, massive guy, um, a wall on the soccer field, who always seemed childlike in his demeanor. Then there was Angel Saez, dark-haired Spaniard with thick horn-rimmed glasses, the most intellectual-looking of the three. And then there was Father Padre Francisco Orozco Yepes, the most playful and endearing one. Father Yepes would stay on later, and he actually became a recruiter after, I believe, superior after Father Quandro was taken out of there. Despite my holy side, I played soccer like a demon to beat Padre Yepes. I scaled mountains, those little mountains and hills, like a goat to beat Ramiro, and did not mind getting on Angel's nerves. Angel, Angel, because he took himself so seriously. One day, a funny story. One day I was helping Father Angel sweep up the dust, and I kept dragging the dustpan away from his brush so the remaining dust prevented from slipping under the pan so it could be picked up. He misunderstood this and thought I was playing with him. He got angry because he thought I was toying with him. And he says to me in his broken English, "You are like a man in the circus." He blurted out impetuously, Pareces un payaso. That's not nice. I don't like that. I suppose he meant the clown. I felt put down and angered by his outburst, but said nothing. I had been well trained by the Irish Christian brothers to keep my mouth shut, at least to some extent. Talking about the Irish Christian brothers, biffing. Physical punishment, as in biffing, was routine with the brothers. Most had a leather strap that they kept under their cassock. It was a standard size and must have been sold at the Irish Christian Brothers Outfitters. Forgive me. They came in a choice of black or brown, big leather straps. This light official weapon was not enough for the real sadists. They preferred a long strip of thick rubber linoleum. People in Ireland will understand perfectly what I'm saying. A quarter or half an inch thick, which could really bite into the flesh of the palm, leaving you bruised and swollen, to shouts of, "You will do your homework!" Or, in my case, "You will not answer back." The livid-faced brother, jowls trembling, would take a little bounce on his toes to lend more impetus to his wallop. Compared to this, Uncle was easy to take. Not to say it didn't hurt. Bedtime was fun time. We were supposed to keep silence, remote preparation for the monastic great silence. uh, from after last year's from after last prayers, excuse me, until after breakfast. The next morning, after breakfast the next morning. So it's got a gran silencio, the monastic silence from after last prayers to the next morning during the night, total silence. This was where our assistants came in. They were supposed to kind of uh, patrol the dormitory and make sure we were all sleeping and behaving ourselves. Ramiro, the impassive Mexican from a small town in the state of Michoacan, which with the unpronounceable name, I think it was Tangancicuaro, would watch over us at lights out, trying to keep us from devilment. He was so large and silent, he looked like a totem pole topped by a lizard head with protruding eyes. Forgive me. Though paler than Father Neftali, he had that stealthy Indian way about him. At any time, he would pop up unexpectedly and stand staring at you with those round, unblinking eyes. His claim to fame and admiration was that Father Maciel had recruited him for the Legion when he was only 9 years old. Some of those first legionaries came from large families of 12 or 15. I'm supposing that maybe their parents did not much miss one from the punch. Father Ramiro and I would continue in our studies, actually. He was always ahead of me, but He was not a bad person to me, even though he was kind of like my superior a few times. But he was not an aggressive person, a very calm person for me at least. On many afternoons, we played soccer and swam at isolated and pristine Mullaghmore, I believe it's called, beach not far from our house. Those of us who were good at soccer could show off our skills and vie with the padres and the assistants who were quite good. Another great attraction for energetic and competitive young colts was the nearby hills. Climbing up the steep, boggy sides, we tested our stamina against nature, the foreigners, and each other. At 5'3" and about 130 pounds, my wiry determination won me many a race to the top, proudly beating even Father James and the other padres. A kind older, yeah, probably around 20-year-old Irish student acted as my angel guardian during postulancy. So he was Brother James Wisdom was supposed to show me the ropes, help me to adjust to my new environment, to be a little bit more religious, a little bit more respectful. Came from County Dublin originally, and he had been in Bundrow's house, excuse me, before our bunch, from the very, very first recruits. The boys were wearing their uh, wearing worn buttonless black cassocks, like the Jesuits a bit, held around the waist with a simple black sash. He and other older brothers took their postulancy very earnestly, as if they were already novices, which you know is the next stage of training, legion jargon, formación, formation, training. And that comes later on. That's the 2 years of spirituality enclosement, where you're supposed to get ready for taking your first vows. It's supposed to be a time of discernment, which never really is in the Legion. But anyway, I remember that Pierce Allen, Michael Cahaney, County Sligo, Francis Coleman, Declan French, both from County Waterford, Sean Keane, I believe from County Westmeath, and Morris Oliver McGowan from just a few farms down the road in County Leitrim also belonged to that very first time. So they're the absolute pioneers. And we liked and respected that very young and quietly driven Oliver, who was always very edifying in his behavior. He was soon renamed Morris by Father Maciel, and he would be the very first Irish legionary to be ordained a priest. Maciel had this fad about changing people's names. Part of his creativity, or where it was, or his need to control or to change people. So he didn't like Oliver so much, so he changed. His name was Morris Oliver, but so Maciel would call him Brother Morris. During the first months of the trip, I had been writing to Father before coming. I'd been writing to Father James Quandro in Bundoran. Now, as Brother Whiston and I became acquainted, he confessed that he had written the personal letters in reply to mine. So he was Father James writing the reply letters to me. I'm sure Father James' English was probably not good enough to write letters. This implied, however, that he had read my letters, my personal letters to the Padre James, which I had assumed were confidential. Again, though hurt and disconcerted, I did not dwell on this too much or resent it, because my beginner's acceptance of the Legion was unqualified and boundless. James Wiston took me under his wing and gave me some advice. Everyone will treat you well here if you keep quiet and stay out of mischief. Probably knew who I was. He remarked that I wasn't as serious as I sounded in my letters. I decided to try to behave more seriously. The novelty of the fast, non-stop pace of daily life, full of hikes to the sea, mountain climbing, swimming, soccer and basketball, Spanish classes, oh, I love Spanish, and chores, was thoroughly enjoyable. Father James began our days with first prayers and morning meditations. We're getting into it, and ending them with examination of conscience and points for meditation at last prayers. Now, how amused we were by Father James' pronunciation of Jesus hanging naked on the cross. He was, not quite up to the standards of the Oxford pronunciation yet. So he'd be talking about the crucifixion and all that. Jesus hanging naked on the cross. He had a naked piece, that was probably hard. But it added to the Legion's attractive foreignness. Now, I remember my first pieces of advice. As the first crop from our country to join this Mexican order, we felt very privileged to be co-founders. Close corroborators and contemporaries of the God-chosen founder, Father Maciel. I was also intrigued by the foreign dimension, since the leaders came from another continent with different language and customs. I made allowances from the start for the fact that they did not speak our language fluently. Thus, when anything they said struck me as odd or maybe even painful or hurtful, I was willing to give them the benefit of the doubt. Our life was changing. It had started out like a vacation, a holiday, but unconsciously we were slowly but surely being transformed into aspirants, postulants to the religious life. As such, we did not frequent the city of Bundoran, which was too worldly. A lot of people going around, bathing togs or whatever, girls dressed scantily, and much less its popular and overcrowded beach area, which I have yet to visit. The first orientation I received from my recruiter, who is now acting as my foreign mater, actually Father James, we were strolling together along the breezy Atlantic cliffs. Seagulls screeching and wheeling, the rollers thundering far below us to our left. And I should start calling my colleagues, my companions, Brother Joseph. Should be brother now. No, Michael and Joe and Paddy and Tommy. And no, Brother Joseph, Brother Michael. And not to, slap them on the back or shoulders or anything like that. No bumping into them, no touching. On another occasion, Father Neftali uh, questioned me, came across, I was probably finished at a crew cut. I was brushing my hair back with this little brush. Uh, 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 and it had the word vanity on the side of it. Uh, does that mean that you are vain? He asked me in his broken English. Mm, always shy and self-conscious, I became confused, didn't know what to say to the priest, quietly swallowing my embarrassment. Maybe he was just trying to engage this introvert in some kind of small talk, but he was way off the mark. My deeper flaws lay elsewhere. I don't think in vanity, maybe. I'm unaware of it. Or even ambition. I like to be liked, accepted, and appreciated. I was possessed by a desire to please, to help, to serve generously without measuring the cost. These double-edged swords, seen by 17-year-old me and the Legion as virtues, were to fuel my vacation calling. Okay, meeting Father Maciel. Now, as I've explained before, the honorary title of Our Father from the Spanish Nuestro Padre, used by members while addressing or referring to our founder, Father Maciel, was, strictly speaking, not a blasphemous connotation, as some critics allege. I've explained this already. Nevertheless, the name does signify a special respect, affection, and veneration. It is the title the Jesuits used for their founder, Saint Ignatius of Loyola. And for your information, members of Opus Dei are known to refer to their founder, Monsignor Escrivá de Balaguer, as El Padre, the Father. Catholics use the term Holy Father and the Holy Father when addressing or referring to the Pope. We can conclude that the title Nuestro Padre, while in no way blasphemous, does attribute a certain distinction and elevated status to Father Maciel. From first contact with the legionaries, we heard of the great priest who founded the order in Mexico in 1941 while still a 20-year-old seminarian. With the magical name of Nuestro Padre, Father Maciel was presented to us as a living saint. I was familiar with the saintly Dublin working man, Mac Talbot, just a generation before me, a recovering alcoholic who used to wear chains to mortify his flesh. I wondered what this living Mexican saint would look like. A visit from the founder of the order, whom we could now call Nuestro Padre, answered my question, further reinforcing our feelings of being special. Founders, special, first Irish. On our way up the road from the dilapidated building where the wash basins were housed, we met. I can still see him gliding, trunk erect, towards us as he came down from Bondrao's house one lovely summer afternoon, 1961. There in the middle of the road, we shook hands with this strange priest, while Father James Quandro translated and introduced us to him. He had an encouraging word for each one of us, and was told something glowing about each prospect. Jimmy told him that I was one of the most intelligent students in Ireland, which I thought was an exaggeration. But anyway, they were foreigners, and Jimmy was probably trying to sell the boss on the good recruiting work he had done. Father Maciel spent a short while with us. I was awed by the man, the founder, the saint, though slightly wary, reticent as I was towards authority figures. Maciel, a sallow-skinned Mexican from the western state of Michoacan, stood a bony 5'11" with thin, receding, light brown hair, an aquiline nose, long, strong, carefully manicured fingers, a masculine tone of voice, wearing a well-tailored, double-breasted black clerical suit, sporting immaculate cuffs and cufflinks. The fashionable thin black-rimmed spectacle frames gave him a French or Italian look. The lean stranger greeted each one of us graciously. There was some kind of searching, piercing look in his pale blue eyes. This is me a few years before, but look at this innocent little fella. I was 13 in this picture, on my way to Connemara to learn the Irish language. Little Sean Paul O'Linoin. Okay, 1956, I think that was. I have it down, so I was very young. Attending legionaries shrouded Mr. Padre in an aura of religious reverence and respect. I perceived him as a commanding, self-assured man, a leader. I can't remember how many days Father Maciel spent with us postulants or where he stayed, presumably at a comfortable hotel in Bundoran town. He certainly did not sleep in one of our cold and damp beds at that old house, but his status was so elevated that no questioning or curiosity crossed my mind. He was above holy nuns who never used the bathroom, and above ordinary parochial priests. I did not need to know practical details about almost Christ-like Father Maciel. One July day at dusk, on the beautiful sand dunes of Mullaghmore, our father, Mr. Padre, spent some time with us, relaxing to get to know his Legion recruits better. Someone mentioned that I liked to sing, and following all Irish tradition, I was asked to perform my party piece. I was a big Johnny Mathis fan. My sisters just were sick and tired of me singing Johnny Mathis at home. I practiced ad nauseam, if you ask my sisters. I obliged the assembly with a rendition of A Certain Smile, a Certain Face can lead an unsuspecting heart on a merry chase. Such was my naive and sentimental disposition. I felt a bit squeamish, wondering about what Mr. Padre would think about the romantic lyrics, translated supposedly by Father James. Maybe James fudged a little on the lyrics. For my part, I had no idea that, ironically, uh, those lyrics could be applied to me. I was what in Ireland they called a behind-the-door singer. From early childhood, family gatherings were held at Granda Lennon's house in Connolly Gardens in Chicor. He was a somewhat foreboding presence. The patriarch sat in his armchair with his back to the chimney, legs crossed, stroking the Yorkshire Terrier's arse with his lace boot, puffing on his clay pipe and spitting into the spittoon at his feet. Each grandchild was expected to perform a party piece. Cousin Edmund recited his allocution. My sister Patty danced. I sang, "How can you buy Killarney?" A song I had learned from my cousin Harry, a good crooner, footballer, and my baptismal godfather. 6 foot Harry was one of my first heroes. Aunt Maisie or Minnie Sheeran, Uncle Harry's wife on my father's side, once told my mother that I should have my voice trained. That has always stuck in my mind. It fell on deaf ears, however, because uh, my mother probably felt it was beyond our means, and so she chose the two for the price of one entertainment dancing for my sister and me with the Cora Kelly School of Irish Dancing. I was so bashful that when performing my party piece, I had to stand behind the half open door to hide my face from the family assembled in the dining room. One evening when I was about 5, I was feeling so particularly shy I could not sing. Despite much cajoling and begging my parents and aunts, I was unable to perform even behind the door. Grandad Lennon got so infuriated he leapt out of his armchair and gave me a violent kick in the arse with his big back leather boot. I turned red as a beetroot, began to sob. I imagine my mother or Aunt Annie must have comforted me. Oblivious to that childhood episode and my father's omission, he didn't kind of defend me against his big grandfather, his dad. I sat in the enveloping dusk on the dunes of Mullaghmore with the other recruits. As we looked out to sea that evening, my desire to please Mr. Padre was so intense, I picked up the courage and sang for him without shielding my face. Another evening, against the backdrop in the house of Bundrow's house, against the backdrop of a large orange sun setting over the glorious Donegal Bay, Father Maciel held court in the main room at Bundrow's house. Mr. Padre used this session of questions. That was the only English word he used. Questions. And supposedly he thought the term cool, though he rarely answered the questions. He usually took the opportunity to pontificate, to lecture, to explain the history of the Legion, the need for vocations, Pope John Paul the 23rd's plea for priests in Latin America. Any questions? Most of the group in awe remained silent. Being 17 and eager to become a missionary as soon as possible, a very earnest little fellow, I had heard it took 15 years to be a Jesuit. So I wanted to know how long it took to be ordained a legionary. I'm getting down to brass tacks here. My fatal attraction for questions led me to inquire along those lines. Nuestro Padre, how long would it take to be a legionary priest? I didn't want this Jesuit thing of God, 15 years. About 7 years was his answer through James Quandro, his convincing reply through the interpreter. Mr. Padre gave me the answer I wanted to hear, and this was part of his charm and part of his charisma, part of his gift was really knowing how to manipulate people, Father Yepes, rest in peace, bless him. Everyone's favorite there was Father Francisco Orozco Yepes, Father Yepes. For some reason, against the custom, they used his maternal cognomen, the most Mexican, so they called him Alfonso. His name was Alfonso Orozco Yepes. Should have been Orozco, but his maternal cognomen or last name was Yepes. They called him Father Yepes. He was the most Mexican, most spontaneous and laid back. It was very, very funny. He had the most wonderful whoppers learning English and then laughed at his own mistakes. Brothers, how is my English? Very good, yes. Um, Sooner and later, it'd be better, yes. Hmm. No? Okay. He was the skinny, high-foreheaded kind of Mexican. Wiry, perpetually smiling. I suppose Father Yepes' innocent kindness had a lot to do with our staying on. During the hikes, he would tell us about the far off wonderland of Mexico in his broken English. In Mexico, very many, how you say, drunk men? Yeah, drunk men, drunks. This struck a very familiar chord with the Irish, while at the same time conjuring up images of peasants shaded by huge sombreros, sleeping under cactus plants with half-empty bottles of tequila dangling from their fingers. Just what I needed. As we hiked along and chatted, I did my best imitation of the cowardly Irish drunk, full of bravado. Who said unflutered? Is he a man or a mouse? I'll hamstring him. I will. Hold me back. Yeah, let me at him. Hold me back. Okay. Father Yepes was thrilled and laughed infectiously. He possessed the most charming childlike smile and the most contagious giggle I have ever known. We loved him dearly, and he helped us through those couple of months as we distant from family and friends, trying not to think so much, followed a regimented schedule, and let go of our carefree youth. One story was told of him arriving at Dublin Airport and asking for a taxi to take him to Bundoran, over 100 miles away. I think Maciel created this story anyway. Uh, Yepes meant to ask for he arrived, at the airport. I need a very expensive. He meant very inexpensive. He said muy barato, muy caro. He said the wrong word. Very expensive. I want a very expensive car to get to Bundoran. Got his English adjectives mixed up. Uh, so they were surprised that a Catholic priest would want to travel in luxury, but one driver did oblige and probably made a fortune out of it. Perhaps this anecdote, as I said, was embellished by Mr. Padre Maciel to get a kick out of Father Maciel, to get a kick out of Father Yepes. Beloved by the Irish for his spontaneity and good nature, soon after ordination in his 30s, around 1965, he replaced, as I said, Father James as the recruiter. Some Irish bishops had asked the Legion to relieve the American salesman. Jimmy Quandro, is half American, half Mexican, and he really had the gift of the gab. He could talk rings around anybody. But some of the Irish priests, kind of, got through him. They kind of started psyching him out, and realized he was not an ordained priest, and very charming, and he was running away with many vocations, scores of young men who he was getting into the Legion of Christ and taking them away from the diocese. So some Irish bishops had asked the Legion to relieve the American salesman of his recruiting duties. And a few years later, I know Father Yepes became the first legionary priest to be a recruiter, and then later, in a very strange situation, he died strangely in a car accident or something similar in Rapallo, northern Italy, under obscure circumstances, a mystery that hasn't been solved to this day. He was a great loss to all who knew him. Coming near the end of the chapter, thank goodness, Father Neftali, then a newly ordained priest, athletic and skilled at soccer and basketball, was much admired and loved by our group. He became another hero. On one occasion, he further enhanced his rating, displaying superior strength by lifting an iron hundredweight piece of iron, displaying superior strength to Father James. James couldn't handle it. Because Father Neftali Sanchez, one of the first Mexican founder children recruited by Father Maciel, was the first priest available in Bundoran for us, we were kind of shepherded away from what I think they were the Franciscan friars in Bundoran town. So we were kind of guided, shepherded gently but firmly towards Father Neftali Sanchez. This is a Legion characteristic that generally, or almost always, you were to confess your sins to a legionary priest. And we didn't know this was kind of a control mechanism, but were we to know at that time? Um, Up to then, we have been traveling to the local community of Franciscan friars. As a fervent practicing Catholic for years, I had been going to confession once every week or two and going to Mass and receiving Holy Communion. So this was nothing new. Feeling special again. In a few weeks, thanks to Father James' pep talks, I was further enthralled by the knowledge that I had been chosen by God as one of the first Irish legionaries. Indeed, feeling privileged and special was the big hook for me, and I would venture to say for most of my companions. Another part of feeling special was going to spiritual direction. Father James explained that this was a custom in the Legion, not only to go to frequent confession, but, in his words, pass to spiritual direction. Again, very, very Spanish. Pasar a dirección espiritual. Pass to spiritual direction with the priest. I had never experienced the spiritual direction before, but he explained that it was just a chat with the padre. Trying out this new experience was not so bad because Father Neftali was kind and refined and gentle, and his Omer Sharif looks kind of helped. I was not sure what to say to him, what to talk about, but I went to see him anyway. After a visit or two, he revealed to me that Nuestro Padre had noticed my qualities. Another Mexican expression. He had become aware of my good qualities, of my talents, shall we say, and that he would like me to consider leaving at short notice in a few weeks' time to start my holy novitiate in Salamanca, Spain. Although this meant a big upgrade in my commitment and a sudden separation from family, friends, and country, it also made me feel very special. I would now be among the first 8 Irish members in history to enter the Legion novitiate. I was being chosen from the total of about 30 students, including those brothers in cassocks who had been there before our large group arrived. I was one of only 3 of the new boys, 3, who would join with 5 of the old brothers. I felt very important and gratified to be a Legion of Christ co-founder. Hasta la vista.